His presence is in this place because his body of believers is in this place. The rain couldn't keep it away. I love it. You may have seen as you came into church today, a home that's getting rained on. That was incredible. Yesterday, we had Help Build Hope, and you guys, in like a matter of 4 hours, put up 2 homes for 2 families that'd be blessed in this community. And it was exciting to work in teams and just kind of even get a taste of like when God rebuilt his temple, like using Nehemiah and the other people to like grab some tools and put it up, and just to get a taste of that yesterday. And the hope that families are going to have, and just seeing us celebrate together as the body, as really God puts on flesh through us being completely who he has called us to be, in our joy and praise for him. And so I'm just really excited. I feel like today's a good day. We're in a series titled Jesus, which may come across as like a generic series for a church. Like that's what it's all about. But that's why we have been in this series now for 6 weeks, soon to be 7, and then 8 weeks. It's because it can be easy to get away from that which really matters most. He's the only one that can be the beginning and the end of his own sentence. And no matter what your problem is in life, no matter your stress, no matter what questions you have, pains you have, the answer is always Jesus, period. And today the period is going to get a little intense. We helped build hope yesterday for just under 6 hours and hammer and nails. And it's crazy to think the greatest hope of the world was also built with some hammer and nails. And he hung on a cross for you and for me for 6 hours. I want to title today's message, Meant to be Intense. Meant to be intense. Some things are meant to be intense more than others. The definition for intensity is extreme degree of strength, force, energy, or feeling. I don't know what you have an intense love for in your life. For me, number one, it's banana nut pancakes from Truett's Luau with coconut syrup over top, and a close second would be my family. No, I'm just kidding. My family is first, but we have to be eating these pancakes together, and that gets really intense. I'm blessed with a gorgeous bride and 3 kids, all under 5, and like I can't even like explain the intensity of my love for them. And even trying to, I have to first at least start with a video. So here's one for you. Those dance moves can't handle it in the car seat, man. Car seat doesn't know what to do. So that's like a few seconds, but my heart just wells up in intensity for my kids, wanting the best for them in words I can't describe. And whatever it is in you that you like have that same or intense emotion about, what's crazy is that everything we can feel intense about pales in comparison to the intensity of this. Pulled up that picture this week, and I'm like, can I make that the background on my phone? And I just couldn't. I was overwhelmed with like extreme guilt, and also extreme gratitude, and this tension like pulled at me, and I'm like, this is intense. The cross was meant to be intense. That's a scene from a picture from the movie The Passion of the Christ, which is honestly a movie that I find myself only really able to watch like maybe once every 2 or 3 years. I just don't like how intense it is. Like I'd much rather have liked to thought that Jesus like came to this world knowing every day was practice until it was game day, and he went up on the cross like, all right, I'm waking up, it's game day, I'm ready to go, get out of this place. Like that's what I want to think about, like he was just faithful and obeying, and I'm doing what's right, I'm not even thinking about it. But when you look at the scriptures, like it wasn't that way at all. He didn't want to get up on the cross. He didn't have the willpower to get up on the cross. Matthew 26 says Jesus is in the garden. He goes a little further when he falls face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples, found them sleeping. "Couldn't you keep watch with me for 1 hour? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away, unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away once more, and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. The worst thing in the world was about to happen to Jesus because of you and because of me. And he didn't want to do it. Crucifixion is the worst form of capital punishment, and was in that time. The Romans were just experts at, making a spectacle of what happens if you're a criminal, and making pain just drip slowly to your death. And they were experts at it. They didn't mess around. We don't see it as much today, so I think it's hard to grasp, but I just imagine, to even scale it to a different degree, as if, what I would do if I drove by and I see somebody that's just kicking their dog in their yard and punching it and taking thorns and hitting it and just beating the tar out of it to where it can't move. And then they get hammer and nails out and they impale it on a stick and they put it in their front yard. How sick and twisted and upset that would be. And I'm like, that's what I feel about a dog, let alone a human, let alone Jesus, the one who created man to even hold a nail. Where the Creator collides with the created, and love with hate, and mercy with madness. A victim did not die on a cross because of the fact that the nail's going through their wrist, bleeding out. They've done studies to find a victim really dies on a cross because of asphyxiation, basically suffocation, where they have to keep pulling themselves up because their chest muscles are hyperextended and they have to just get breath. And that's why after Jesus dies, right, the criminal's legs, they get broken so that they can't lift up anymore, and it'll be a faster death. But typically, crucifixion lasted several days. And what I want to zero in on a little bit is two people's response and reaction, in the most unlikely people to have this kind of response and reaction. It's two Romans, a Roman centurion and the Roman governor Pilate. They're not religious men, but they are experts and veterans at crucifixion. They've done this time and time again. In Luke 23, it says, "It was now about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, while the sun's light failed. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, said, 'Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.' And having said this, he breathed his last. Now, when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God, saying, 'Certainly this man was innocent.'" Mark's gospel. "And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, 'Surely this man was the Son of God.'" Matthew made sure he recorded the same thing. Everybody's amazed that this Roman centurion who knew nothing about his life and what he did and all that necessarily didn't have any reason to jump in and become a Jew, but just what he sees on the cross and how he died is mesmerizing. Joseph of Arimathea then wants to take Jesus off the cross and bury him in a tomb. He has to get Pilate's permission. He runs back to Pilate, and Pilate's amazed to hear that he's already dead. Look at Mark. It says, Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. He said, "I got to get the centurion." He comes back. He asked him if Jesus had already died. And when he learned from the centurion it was so, he gave the body to Joseph. And as you got to look back, again, this is weird. This is odd. Why they would be so amazed at how quickly he died and how he died specifically. For the centurion to say two things: this man was innocent and this man was the Son of God, which has huge implications. But again, them breaking the criminal's legs means the death was through suffocation. At the end, you don't get to die the way that Jesus did, where he yells out these two things. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. God, why have you forsaken me? And then Luke's account, Jesus called out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. When he had said this, he breathed his last. And that amazed them. Because if you think, if you're suffocating, first of all, anything you say is not going to be loud. And yet he does this and dies and breathes his last when he says these words and gets this reaction. Almost a reaction as if it's almost like he decided to go on his time. And Jesus said that, actually, gave us that heads up in John 10. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. And even with the crowds, the religious ones who did follow him and think he was full of it, it says that the crowds that assembled for the spectacle, when they saw what had taken place, returned home beating their breast, which is a sign of remorse and repentance, like we messed up. Like a sign of guilt that was intense. Extreme guilt. Why? If he is the Son of God and if he is innocent, they're asking, why? Why was the cross this intense? So that all of our lives would not be tense. So they're stuck in extreme guilt, about to move to extreme gratitude as they learn this. So our lives would not be tense. Isn't that interesting? Jesus does come into the world, even as he experienced it, it was really tense. Seeing the results of sin in people's life and chaos and problems, and we feel it ourselves, this uptight, I got to control, I've got to fix these problems. And worry, and I got to make people think this about me. All these things in our life that makes us tense. Even looking at how Jesus was butting heads with the Pharisees. You'd think, if he's that annoyed with the Pharisees and them doing it wrong, why would he continue to spend time with them? Were the Pharisees his enemy? No, the Pharisees were still people he loved tremendously. He just saw, you guys are way too tense. You're making it way too tense on anybody else to get to me or to get to God that they're trying to do. And you yourselves are way too tense, worried about your social status and power and all the things that you guys put in place. This is what Jesus came for. This is why the cross was this intense. Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, come to me all that are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. How extreme his love is to want to remove our tension that much. Not only our tension that we face here, but our tension that we would face for eternity because of sin. Again, sin is the cause of tension and chaos. God did not bring chaos into the world. We did. Man did. And when we did, we created this boundary line between us, right? Where they get kicked out of the garden right away. Then you just see chaos and tension. And Cain killing his brother. And then he died, and he died, and he died, and he died. And you see all this stuff just funnel out of control. And God's whole intent from the Old Covenant and the Old Testament all the way to the New and where it is today is to restore that relationship to him. But the thing is, there was this boundary line between us and his presence, but he wanted to at least keep us in the game, keep us to where he's standing on the edge of that boundary line at all times, but just for us to be able to get close to him. And that's where we see in the Old Covenant the temple come about. And the significance of the temple and what happened as Jesus breathed his last breath. Matthew 27, when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The curtain, this huge, giant, purple and blue ornate curtain that was heavy, And nobody was allowed on the other side, because on the other side was this perfect cube, the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, where God's presence was said to reside. And so only to be able to get to his presence was if man didn't sin. Well, man couldn't sin, but they could make atonement for sins. And God sets up this foreshadowing of blood being shed. And so one time a year, the high priest comes in with the blood of a perfect lamb, gets behind the curtain, and makes atonement, spreading this blood for our sins once a year so that we could get close to him. But what I love about what happened when Jesus was on the cross is that getting close was not enough. We still weren't completely over the boundary line, because we can only do that if we were perfect and with him. And the crazy piece is, the most holy place was set up for us to go around that curtain and us to set up a sacrifice. But then when the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, goes up on a cross and makes a sacrifice himself, that doesn't make sense, period. Like, we messed up. Even though we can't completely get across, like, we messed up. It's on us. Why would he have to sacrifice anything? And yet you see the semblance of this curtain. And there is no more boundary line. There is no more separation. I was in Kenya, Africa, last summer in June for 2 weeks, and we did a mission trip there. And at the end of the week, we were able to go on this safari from between Kenya and Tanzania, and that was awesome. Got to see a lot of animals. But one of the craziest experiences was when we stood on this bridge looking at the Mara River, this boundary line between Kenya and Tanzania. And that was pretty awesome, as he's telling us, like, hey, in just a month, millions of wildebeest are going to be like piling down to cross this river and get over to greener pastures. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, like just thinking about that. And as he continues to talk about, and we're imagining this sight of wildebeest crossing, and we're walking along the edge really close to the water and seeing like these skeletons and these skulls, and then we see these hippos. I think I've got a video of how close we were to these hippos, maybe. But they were like an arm's throw away, playing around. But I'm like, that's like 4 hippos in between me and this guy with this one gun. And then he's telling us about how the caribou cross, and like hippos and crocodiles just have this heyday, eating and chomping. And it made us a little tense. In fact, one of the girls in our group got so tense, she passed out in a spot that really was not ideal. She passed out right along the river's edge. And I'm like, wow, we've got 1 gun and 4 hippos. And as soon as she woke up from passing out, she said, Aaron, please tell me you got a picture of that. So I thought I'd show. But that got me tense. What got me even more scared was how close we were to this animal. Maybe. That was not a picture I took. But a 20-foot crocodile's across the river's edge. And as we're looking at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought that was a boulder. And we're standing on the bridge at that point. And through all this, I'm thinking to myself, like, couldn't the wildebeest like just see this bridge? Like every year, this is an unsuccessful crossing. Every year, weeping and gnashing of teeth every year. The thing is, we also have this crossing, and it's once in our lifetime. And you don't get another chance. You don't get to wing it. You don't get to cross your fingers. It's only if you see the cross, which is amazing. You made a way when there was no way. That's why Jesus says in Matthew 7, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it, but small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Only a few find it. As I've tried to grasp, like, the love of a father sacrificing his one and only son for me, it's reached a different level now that I have only one son. Silas. And I just think, like, what would it take for me? Like, what kind of love for me to use my son, maybe, to stick him out, to take a bullet, to save a people that may never acknowledge it or accept it? I couldn't do that. It'd be in vain. Like, why would I sacrifice that love for the chance of the reason I did it never being found? The bridge never being found, the cross never being found. Here's the thing about the cross: no matter how intense it was, it doesn't matter if we believe it was intense. If we don't help other people see the cross, then we're treating it as if it never existed. That's hard. Okay, so the cross was intense so that we could live a life that was not tense, which means we get a cross and we can just party and enjoy. But Jesus on the cross was actually the third significant cross from the Old Testament to the New Testament. There were 3 crosses, all foreshadowing Jesus' ultimate sacrifice on the cross. And the first was the Red Sea cross, where again, God's getting close to them in his presence through Moses holding the staff, and they're at this impossible crossing of the Red Sea, and Egypt's coming after them to slaughter them and make a bloodbath, and they've just been in slavery to them, and yet, boom, they get a cross on the other side through God's presence with them and save them from this bondage and slavery. And the Jordan River, right? How's the Jordan River happen? Well, then they wander 40 years and nights in the wilderness, and then they reach this boundary line into their promised land of the Jordan River. But when they reach the Jordan River is at flood stage, which has everybody on the opposite side pretty confident that this boundary line keeps them safe. And yet God says, tell the high priest to take the Ark of the Covenant and step in the water, and they step in the water, and same thing. Jordan River at flood stage cuts off at one end, cuts off on the other. The people cross through on dry land. You're like, wow, we're in the promised land. Let's kick it back. Enjoy. Put a party together. God gives them a job. When they crossed the Red Sea, their job was through obeying God's law and commandments, getting rid of their other idols and circumcision and following him, building this temple in the wilderness, still doing animal sacrifices on that to get close to him. After they crossed the Jordan River, they got a job. Now go take possession of these cities in the promised land. And basically it was like, you don't have to do much. Just let my presence get to work. But they still had a job. Likewise, us getting across through the love of Jesus on the cross, we have a job. We have a job. It wasn't to get our respect. It was also to get our response. And to imagine there's one crossing, and that for so many to maybe not see the bridge. So our job for helping other people see the love of the cross is to help people not be tense. Help people not be tense. That's the result of Jesus on the cross. That's what he wants us to experience. And how we do that is in multiple different ways, but part of it is realizing it doesn't have to be an intense fear of ours to help other people see the cross. I think that's a lot of times what we wrestle with, like, how do I share my faith? I know I need to be sharing my faith. What should I do? This past week I was at Starbucks early morning, preparing for today, and I'm on the laptop doing what the rest of the people are doing, which is kind of chilling in Starbucks. And there was a guy in the very center of the room. I think he is in the ministry or whatever, but I know he was really excited about God, and he really believed in God, and he made it known to the whole restaurant, or store, coffee shop. And so much so that he'd be meeting with a guy, and then any call that he got, he put on speakerphone and turned it all the way up for everybody to hear, and he'd respond and answer and say things like, yeah, and I'm a righteous man of God. And I'm like, oh man, this is intense. Okay. And people would walk by him, and he'd stop them and be like, hey, do you follow God? And if they said no, he'd be like, let me tell you a story about someone who followed God. And I'm like, what about your own story? Again, I'm just observing. seeing his efforts, evaluating, like, am I not that good of an evangelist to have this fear to do this? And so he's doing that with that guy, but it doesn't matter. If you said, yes, I do follow God, you weren't off the hook. In fact, he said, let me just send a prayer up for you right now, brother. And we just pray out loud and just the center of attention in Starbucks. And I'm like, whoa, this is intense. Should I be doing this too? So I just kept observing, and I'm like, what do people do? They order their coffee, all right, and then they take a seat as far away from that guy as they possibly can. Or they grab their drink and they hightail it out the door, which is what I try to do as soon as I shut my laptop. And I really don't want to make a lot of fun of this guy's efforts and how God could still use even that method. But I can say what I felt, and what I felt in that moment was like sadness. Because getting God's presence across, us embodying God's presence, is never something that causes people like to draw away from. Like, God's presence is something that actually attracts people and makes them want to get close. This is what Jesus did. He was all about helping people not be tense, whether he saw that they were sick, whether he saw that they were having difficulties with other health issues, or crippled, or blind, or lame, or demon-possessed. Even the Pharisees, it was all about helping people not be tense. And he didn't do it in like over-the-top ways. He did it in ways that were actually subtle, but very powerful. And what that could mean for our lives as well, these subtle acts of love and kindness, not like I'm showing acts of love, I'm showing kindness, I'm helping a neighbor out, but intentional love of getting the love of the cross that was intense across. I was also in the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A and see this guy that has to open his door and can't put his window down. And I just had that moment. I'm like, he's probably tense about that. Like, what if I could help him? Like, that'd be cool. Like, fix his window. What would he think of that? And I'm just going through like how these conversations could happen, and it's not like, why'd you do that for me? Oh, because I've just boom, and we throw it on them. But in subtle ways, where they're like, I just got to know, like, you keep doing these things that are relieving tension from my life, and I like that. But why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep helping me not be tense? And a subtle response, but a powerful response could be, well, I've just experienced something really intense, and this is my response for doing so. All the while praying, because it's God who opens the door for opportunity for them to ask another question and be like, well, so what was that thing that you experienced that was so intense? Just that Jesus' love for me was actually real when I understood how intense his death was on the cross. Again, subtle but inviting, and just hoping that they'll continue to ask questions of prayer. But you get close to people because you're resembling, you've got the aura of God's presence around you, not to make other people tense, but to relieve their tension. And let me say that the cross was intense for us to also have an intense response. But our intense response is how intense we are looking and hunting for opportunities to see people in need, to see people hurting, to see people that would like something removed and tension from their life, and actually acting on them. Like, that's an intense response to the cross. If I don't help people see it. I know when I get across to the other side and I see Jesus like walk towards me in love and nail-pierced hands and feeling all the love in that moment, like, I'd hate to ask myself, man, Aaron, like, why didn't you help other people get to see this kind of love? Like, Aaron, did you really just not think that eternity was really where the majority of my life was, and my life here on earth is a speck? Did I really doubt how good he is tonight? Did I get it across? It demands a response. And we help people not be tense because we are consumed with how he has made us feel at peace and at rest. I've grown up in the church. My dad's been in ministry all my life. And when I got to the University of Central Florida my freshman year, like, my faith became a mess. Like when you put spaghetti in a microwave and you forget to cover it up. Like that's what my faith felt like after my freshman year at UCF. I had a psychology class that first year with 500 people in the room, and he would do everything he can to say, your parents brainwashed you. It's time you reach this level of higher thinking and what's right. And he would literally make fun of Christians at the end of every single class. And I'm like, how is this possible? How can he do this? And I guess he can't, because I find out now today he's fired from there. Yeah. But it's still like, had me thinking, like, wait a minute. The things that he was saying, like faith is a crutch for the weak, like, is he right? Like, am I just chasing butterflies? The next semester I had a world religions class, and again, I'm hearing all these other options and what people are doing, and I'm like, whoa, maybe there's more logic to that. Maybe what I'm feeling like and what I'm following isn't all there is. And this like welled up so much inside of me. That spring break, I get home and I'm feeling tense around my parents because I've resolved, like, I think you guys have brainwashed me, and all this life that you've dedicated and you've made me go to church and do things like that is full of crap. Like, that's not real. And it was crazy because I was ready in that moment to be done with my family. I knew what that meant, but I was so adamant about following what's really real, not faith, not blind faith, but what I could put my full confidence in. And I go back to my room ready to literally pack my stuff. And I just have this moment. I'm like, all right, let's search the universe. Everything that I've learned and taken in from all these different religions and possible ways, and I'm searching like for something that's real, and it's spinning, and the only thing I end up seeing is Jesus. Period. Oh, man. And that was intense. Because for him to be able to show up alive in that way to me meant he really did raise from the grave, which meant he really did have to go up on a cross, which means a really giant problem existed for the rest of mankind. And my next feeling I felt was anger. A different kind of anger. Anger towards the world. And not an anger against them, but an anger that welled up for them. To see the greatest act of love ever, the easiest path to get across in their life, and yet they're chasing other things. And it's no longer for me just a thing that I'm following, but it's real. And this anger welled up that I'm like, I can't ever let this go. Kind of like Bruce Banner.
Dr. Banner, now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
That's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry.
That is intense, no doubt, the Hulk. But that's really what I experienced inside, was like my admiration for the cross, my respect, my hope that people will somehow get across, that somehow they will find it like changed. I'm like, no, I've got a job. I've got something to pursue that I can be confident about. And as I got close to the evidence, man, and that was overwhelming, coming from all this higher thinking that's saying there's no evidence and it's blind faith. And I end up finding it. Things like the Gospel of Matthew, modern day scholars now have determined was written as soon as 50 AD and as late as 63 AD, which means at the most 30 years between when Jesus died and rose from the grave and everything else he did, and when this book was published that had plenty of time for other eyewitnesses to be like, that didn't happen, this isn't real, this isn't right. And yet Mark, and then Luke, and then John, and I was excited because after this moment I transferred to Kentucky Christian University. They gave me Lee Strobel's Case for Christ, and man, did that jack me up. Because I'm like, I got the confidence now, what's keeping me? What's letting me keep this boundary line between me and the rest of the world? That's not there. A tension that I have to talk about the love of Christ, there is no tension. It's just living what the love of Christ has done to me, living a life that's not tense, that's eye-opening. That's attractive. That draws people in. But it's not something I'm okay to just believe, to just work at a church for, to just tell you about today. Because there's people who have never seen this. It's intense for me and for you and all of us to not have to go through life being tense. Extreme guilt, but extreme gratitude for us to respond to the extreme degree. So the challenge is for you today, how do I respond? How do I let this sit? Not as if I've known it for 30 years or 40 years or 50, but as if it's like, whoa, the first time today to understand the point of this suffering and for it not to go in vain. I gotta get real. I gotta be okay letting this tension build up inside me. It's interesting that billionaires say the path to being a billionaire is follow what angers you. What problem in the world are you facing? And as soon as you solve that problem, then you just get really intense about telling that solution to the rest of the world. And that's how you gain up all the success. It's cool. All right, that's a method to success. But the problem is you can't take $1 billion with you to eternity. And that's billions and billions of more days than the days we're going to spend here. Was his love enough? Are you ready to attack his love? And let him work inside you and fully relieve all the tension maybe you're feeling in life. Because you realize how intense his love is for you. Jesus, period.